Hello friends, my name is Phil and welcome to PG Prototypes. Before I get started, I want to say a huge thank you to all the new subscribers. I really appreciate the support. It goes a long way to motivating me to make this channel the best that it can be at this point in time. So huge thank you, very much appreciated. So what's in today's episode? Well, I had hoped to get stuck into some of the groundwork, but time restraints have meant that I've got to kind of cut down my video a little bit today, but I hope to still entertain you with what I have done. So if you remember the last video, I built the last two buildings for the layout, but I didn't get a chance to detail them, which was kind of a big deal. I really wanted those final touches on both buildings to make them feel like they fit into the rest of the layout. So for today's video, I'm going to show you exactly how I did the rest of the detailing. So I really hope you enjoy. The first details I wanted to tackle were the platforms at the back of the two-story building. If you remember from the last video, I made the wooden additions to the back of the buildings and the doors were about a centimeter off the base level. So I needed to have a viable reason for the doors to be so high. For these details, I'm using XXX cardboard as it's really easy to work with. I've taken mumblings of criticism for using this material over the years, as many purists feel it is not the best material for models, but I'm happy with it, and as long as you don't plan on having a lot of moisture around your layout, it works just fine. After gluing the legs onto the platforms, I add some steps to give the layout inhabitants easy access to the doors at the back of the buildings. As you can see, this is a tricky task, but the end result is well worth it. Each platform got a coat of grey primer and then it was onto a black wash to accentuate the recessed areas. I left them to dry and then gave them a dry brush to bring out the raised details. Next, I wanted to add a storage tank to one of these platforms, and this would go on the single-story building. So I 3D printed a cylinder with some ends, and I laser cut some XXX card for the support rings. This was a bit of a tricky one, so I used a toothpick to carefully apply glue to all the components. After priming the cylinder with some grey spray paint, I stuck it to its stand. So far, I was happy with the look. I gave it a good dry brushing to pull out all of the details. As I've mentioned before, I'm using an older 3D printer, so you can see the layer lines on this 3D print, but I like to keep them instead of using finishing resin or sanding, as I feel it adds a little more character to the component. The next order of business was to add a roof cap to the single-story building. I wanted to add some gutter detail to this building, so I went for some 3mm MDF with a channel engraved in the center. They are a little on the chunky side, but after testing them out, I was happy with their overall look. So I'm trying something a little different for the downpipes. I'm going to use a plastic shaft from a cotton bud to get the job done. I cut off a small piece near the end at a suitable angle, and then what I'm going to do is flip it around and stick the two parts together to create my downpipe with a small spout at the end. I landed up making the spouts a little on the long side, so I did actually trim them down later on. This plastic turned out to be a little tricky to glue together, but I did manage to get it to work in the end. I use a thick cyanoacrylate for most of my gluing purposes, and I use a spray activator to get it to set quickly. This was a tricky component to get right, and I don't think I would have managed with a slow setting glue. After giving the gutters a coat of grey spray paint primer, I glued them into their final positions on the model, and again I made use of the super glue with a activator. Here are the cotton bud downpipes primed with a grey primer. I'm really happy with how they turned out, and I think they are a nice cheap way to add this type of detail to a model. And here is what the building looks like with the gutters and the downpipes installed. I added a small amount of glue to the side of the tank stand and I stuck it to the end of the building. Seeing that I haven't designated the building's purpose yet, I'm not really sure what this tank would be used for, but I feel that it's a nice detail to add onto this type of building. I had noticed this feature on the original AI image and I felt it looked really good in place here. I wanted to add a little more detail to this tank, so I decided to use some leftover cotton bud plastic to add a pressure release stack at one end of the tank. I also wanted the tank to look like it was permanently connected to the building in some way, so I needed to fabricate some type of piping. If you've been doing this hobby for a while, you will know that specialist hobby supplies can get really expensive. So I try to use off-the-shelf items where I can. And this 1.6mm brazing rod works very well for piping and it's incredibly malleable. This makes it easy to bend and shape, and you can add piping work relatively quickly. Here are the two small pipes I fabricated and glued to some MDF, and I've sprayed them with grey primer as usual, and I'll secure them in place with some super glue. Once the pipes were secure, I gave them a coat of black acrylic paint, which I landed up changing to bronze later in this build. The downpipes also needed some attention, so I gave them a coat of the same black acrylic paint. I really enjoy adding roof details to buildings because for the most part we actually look at the layout from a top view, so I wanted to add something interesting to the roof of this building. I modeled up some AC units and printed them in PLA plastic. As I've mentioned before, my printer is on the old side, so the resolution isn't great, but I try to use this to my advantage when painting and dry brushing because there's a little extra detail where the layer lines aren't so smooth. I wanted the units to sit parallel to the ground when they were installed, so I fabricated these angled stacks out of triplex card to do the job. I cut a small centering plate and attached it to the bottom of each unit and glued the stacks in place. I don't know what I was originally thinking, but I printed 10 of these AC units, but once I actually put them on the roof, I realized that 4 were more than enough. I stuck each of the units in place, and then I got stuck into adding a heavy wash to each one of the units. I am using Vallejo Black Grey for the wash. I find that this color gives a great smoky dirt effect when it dries. These small details are definitely time consuming, but I like the end result and it makes me think of a building in a soot-filled yard. With the first building's details complete, I moved on to the second building's details. I started off by attaching the stair platforms to the back of the building. So when I design a building, I kind of have an idea of what I want it to look like at the end, but I never really know how it's going to turn out until I get around this stage of the build. I feel like adding these small details at this stage really makes a model come to life, and as I've mentioned before, one has to choose the amount of detail they add to a kit, as it can become a really time-consuming endeavor. I think these platforms look really good and they will be a great place to add a few workers and some boxes or details at a later stage. So it's on to the downpipes. I've used the same 3D model that I designed for the previous buildings that I did in earlier videos, but I just adjusted them to be the correct height for this building. And just like before, I'm sticking them onto each corner using super glue. So I noticed that this downpipe would pour rainwater directly onto the platform if it was a real one, so I felt this could be a nice opportunity to add a small little bit of detail on this back platform. I cut a drain cover out of 0.5mm cardboard and stuck it below the outlet, then painted it with black acrylic paint. Once dry, I dry brushed it with some white acrylic paint just to bring out that detail. I felt that this factory needed some sort of extraction system for whatever it produces, so I modeled an extraction vent and printed it out. Although it wasn't the worst print, it definitely wasn't great. And rather than try to troubleshoot my printing process, I decided to make the vent out of cardboard instead. I drew up a basic design and I cut it out of 1mm XXX card. The bends were way trickier to cover than what I had initially planned, but the vent did come out looking okay, and I planned to paint it and heavily weather it anyway, so I wasn't too bugged by this. I decided to cut some side plates out just to cover some of my shoddy workmanship, but it also provided a little more detail to the vent. The vent needed a viable method of connection to the building, so I cut out some small U-shaped brackets that would provide the correct spacing between the wall and the vent. So I'd like this vent to cover a bit of that undetailed section of wall from the mistake I made in the initial build. I added a small amount of glue and positioned it in an adequate space. Now, I'm not a pro model builder, and I am happy with this level of detail, but looking at it in the videos, I should have spent a little more time cleaning up this particular piece. I wanted this vent to look weathered and beaten, so I gave it a coat of a mix of burnt umber paint and Vallejo weathering powder. The mixture paints on wet and glossy, but when it dries, it actually has a powdered texture, which I really like. And this paste can also be used as a filler for very small discrepancies in the model. So I had also built a second vent just like this one, and I decided to add that to the first building. So with all this done, let's take a look at how both buildings turned out. I'm really happy with both buildings. For now, the colors look great and they fit in with the rest of the layout, so that's important. There's always the opportunity for more detailing, but these will do great for my purposes. Detail parts can really bring your layout to life. They tend to be those small parts of a building that we never notice in reality, but if they're missing, we can tell that something is off. Before I was able to make my own buildings, I used to really enjoy just adding detail parts to existing second-hand kits that I bought at swap meets. These little flashes of uniqueness really personalize anyone's layout. So in today's video, I want to have a bit of a discussion about something that I try to highlight in my building, but it's a really good comment that came from Ken something 379, and he says, excellent job on the painting. I'm not a fan of the model style. You can see exactly how it was put together. Every single corner sticks out like a sore thumb, unless it's a building that you can sand down every corner edge, then apply putty and sand again. It's impossible to hide the glaring corners. If your entire layout was covered with these, every single one of them would have what I consider a defect. And quite frankly, that's right. If we look at pro buildings, that is totally right. If these were the type of things we would take to a show or expect of renowned master kit builders or companies, it's totally right. And in all honesty, I did try and make kits and sell them locally, and it didn't go well, so I stopped doing it. They just weren't up to the standard that other modelers wanted, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. So the point is totally valid, and it brings up a very important thing about model railroading for me. I don't show my layouts to anyone really. I just play with them myself. I don't have operating sessions, anything like that. And they work for me. They work for my layout, and that's just fine. I don't plan on entering any contests or trying to sell kits again. It didn't work for me in the past, and right now my trains just give me a lot of pleasure, and that's fine. And nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if it was a professional kit and something that would appear in shows, or if someone was selling it, you would want something that maybe has cleaner corners and is a bit more refined. To answer Ken's question or statement, you can sand it down. It's made out of MDF, so you could sand them down, you could add putty, you could fill them, you could absolutely do all of that stuff. It's not for me. I don't want to put that much time into them really, and that's just my laziness and my standard that I'm happy with. But the important part of all of this is you have to choose your level that you want to model. I don't know how it is in other countries, but in South Africa, I've seen many modelers stop doing the hobby because there's just too much pressure on them to provide a higher standard of modeling than what they're capable of producing. And they kind of get scared off and don't stay in the hobby. And for me, ultimately, I think the more people that do the hobby, the better. That's what we want. If we have more people running their model trains and needing product built, suppliers will stay open longer, shops will stay open longer, and the industry will grow. So it's important to me to show that you can still have a pretty nice model train layout without it being perfect and without it meeting everyone's expectations or needs. Obviously, if you're going into show layout building, you need to up your game. You need to see what others are doing. You need to get as much advice as you can. You need to put those hours in. Any type of model building requires that. You need a lot of effort to get good quality models out and for things to look realistic or professional. But the most important thing is that you choose that. You choose where your goal is, what your target is. Is it something that's going to bug you? If it is, put the time in. If it's not something that's going to bug you and you're more concerned with running your trains, then that's fine too. But all of it's okay. Everything's okay. But I just thought that was a really, really good comment and a good observation, and I can absolutely see what he's pointing out. But for me personally, it's just not such a big deal. It doesn't affect my enjoyment of running model trains. I enjoy the building element. That's a lot of fun for me, but it's really just for me. So I'm quite happy with where they're at. I did a lot of 1:35 scale and 1:48 scale model building, and I used to spend hours filling and sanding and trying to get things perfect. And when it worked out, it was great. And when it didn't work out, I would get quite upset, and I would almost feel that I wasted a model if I didn't get it right. So for me with model trains, I just don't have that requirement right now. And maybe if it was a case of entering these into a competition or trying to get it into a magazine or something like that, which is just outside of my skill set, I just don't have that. So if I was going to try and do that, I'd put a lot more effort into it and definitely sand down, full, get it right. But as I say, for me, it's okay. And I think that this is such an important thing that we show people in this hobby when they start out. It doesn't matter if it's a young person or an old person. Just show them that you can start off with something that's not perfect and you can build up to that. And you can also just choose a point that is good enough for you. So I have mentioned it in previous videos before, and I think I mentioned the Model Railroader article. It's called something like Falling into the Detail Trap, something like that. I'll hunt it down and post it, but it talks exactly about this. How good is good enough? And you have to make that choice. If we have to go according to what other people want from our layouts, we might not actually finish them and we might lose enjoyment. But for others, they get a huge amount of enjoyment showing that fine scale detail work to others, and that's great. So long and the short of it, choose a point that you're happy with, stick to it, and get as much enjoyment as you can for your own well-being in the hobby. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate the support. I appreciate the subscribers and the thumbs up. It all helps. It all goes a long way to keeping me motivated to keep this channel going. So thank you so much for all of that. As usual, if you have any comments or anything you want to ask me about, please just put it in the comments below. I try and get to every comment as best I can. And if you saw something that you liked in the video that perhaps you want me to post a model or a blueprint of, please just let me know in the comments and I will make that available to you. So on that note, I want to say a huge thank you again, and until next time, keep training.